I do think racism affects our school. Who it's most affected by, I wouldn't say anybody in particular. I think that everyone is affected. How it's affected is different. People who are not a minority, I think that participating in it or not standing up to it or seeing it and not really understanding what's going on is just adding to their personal ignorance. I think people who are a minority that are affected by racism, for them, it can be debilitating, frustrating, get angry. So I think it affects everyone, but just maybe in different ways.
As much as I like to be able to say no, my answer has to be yes. I do believe it exists. And who is affected by it the most, I would say, are, typically speaking, most of our black and brown students.
I think that racism is everywhere, unfortunately. I think everyone's affected, actually. Yeah, I mean, I do. I think everyone's affected. Yeah, I think some people don't even know that they're affected. And that's kind of what we as teachers have been really trying to work on and help ourselves, but also be able to kind of bring it out in the open with our students. So we can hopefully get beyond this and you know, move forward.
Yeah. Second question is, what race do you most identify yourself with?
Finding, you know, as a national dialogue as a whole, is that implicit and inherent racism does exist. So I'd say our school is no different, considering the melting pot of different cultures and different individuals that we have attending here. Who is it? What was it? Who is it most?
Who is it most affected by it?
Who is it most affected by? So who is the racism most affected by? Well, I would say it's a teacher to student relationship, I would suppose. You know, kind of administrators against students. If you look at the, you know, the breakdown of the student population, it's 50% white maybe, and then 50% that the other half is divided amongst, you know, black, Somalian, Latino, blah blah blah, whatever. Whereas our faculty is probably 90% white, I would say.
I could never say 100% sure that that racism is in our school. I wouldn't I wouldn't be so much surprised if there was. I believe that racism is something that is more learned than an actual feeling. So I wouldn't be surprised by it just because of all the things that are going on in the world these days. As far as who's affected by it, I think everyone is affected by it. Again, it's something that is, I believe, learned, and if someone does have a hatred toward another group, it's also affecting them because they're not able to build relationships with others that could probably help them with life or understanding of another one's culture.
And second,
It's always going to be racism, probably. Probably who's affected by it most is the darker skin tone classmates, just because it's how it's kind of always been.
the second question is, what race do you most
Impacted in some way by some form of racism at school. Who do I think is affected by it most? I think we're all affected by it, but I would just, you know, it's obvious that minority students, African American students, Hispanic students, students from backgrounds from Africa and whatnot are going to be more affected than the rest of us. But racism impacts the school as a whole and brings everything down.
And the second question is, what race do you identify yourself with, and has this affected your life choices?
Oh, okay. So what race do I identify with? I identify. I'm a white male. So when I think of race, I mean, I guess I'm white. So that's what I identify with. And it absolutely has impacted me. there are many privileges that I am awarded by no means of my own, simply because of my skin color. You know, being a white male, I grew up in a town that was extremely white. Fargo Moorhead does not have a lot of diversity. So I don't stand out. I can blend in easily. So absolutely, being white is, I've felt the impacts of being white. And so, yeah, I think that answers your question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you have a third one?
I would say, yeah. How is
I would say absolutely, and I will tell a personal story. You remember in class last year, and we had a number of Muslim students, and then Donald Trump came out with the BS that he's spewing about Muslim students, or Muslims in general, and, you know, being scared of terrorism, da 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 da. And I remember coming into school and being embarrassed and needing to go talk to my Muslim students and apologize for what was being said about them and to them by somebody who's running to be their president. And so that was a very difficult day. I also think there is, I think there can be the kind of racism that is sanctioned institutionally by saying we expect more of certain students, read white, than other students of color.
yeah?
And I think that's alive and well here.
Think about others around me. What are they doing? What are they thinking about? Start watching the media. I'm like, how are other people gonna feel about this? How is this gonna, like, maybe affect me on a day-to-day basis in this situation? I start thinking, like, very broad, what's going on, and the fear of the unknown. I don't know how other people are actually interpreting things or how they're gonna react to things. That's good.
I represent myself under the white Caucasian label. How's that affected my life is I know I've gotten a ton of rights and other items that other people don't have, just associated with how I look, and how people perceive who I am, what I am, based on the color of my skin. So I don't have to fear for or worry about situations as other groups typically would.
Well, I am a white male. You know, growing up, I was brought up in I actually grew up in St. Louis Park, so, you know, many white people that I lived around in my community, but I did, you know, growing up, it wasn't strictly white. I mean, there were some black families that lived near me. Playing sports, I had, you know, white friends, black friends, Asian friends. You know, I had all kinds of different ethnicities growing up, and I think that helped me just to kind of see the big picture, not just white community, which is, you know, how I grew up, but with a lot of different cultures around me, which I'm glad.
And then the last question is, how was racism affected?
My mother is Hispanic. She's not white at all. And my father is of European descent, Swedish and Scottish. So I'm mixed if we're getting technical, yeah.
And last question is, how has racism affected your life?
I identify as African American. I don't know. I guess I couldn't say like how it has affected me in any way. Just because I've never walked in the shoes of somebody from a different race to know anything different. I'm just used to the way I'm approached as a black man, and in a way just everyday life is. And so I'm not 100% sure of how it feels to be in someone else's shoes, to be whether it's white, Asian, Muslim. I'm not sure how it is for each other race, other race, but that's how it is for me.
And then what is it that
How would
I think personally, I probably identify more with black, I guess, and it would be more of like how I'm perceived by others, even though my mom is actually white. I think that just the perception from other people, like I get a lot of prejudgments before I even start things. So a lot of times I feel like I have to prove myself first before I actually get to even just start. Where I think I wouldn't have to worry about that otherwise.
Again, being a white male in a society that is geared to being a level of more whiteness, I get more opportunities than other groups typically would, based on the race. Like I said, I've benefited from it from over the histories between being able to get homes, loans, so on and so forth. That would be more of a struggle just because of the fact of my parents getting it, me being able to compete, and I'm inheriting it, and a lot of that has to do with, again, being the color that I am.
I mean, as a white male, I didn't realize this, but I mean, I grew up pretty privileged. And I'm starting to see,
Yeah.
as a lot of us are here at this school as teachers, what can we learn from that, and how can we learn about different races and just kind of first realize that I was very privileged and realize what can I do with that? How can I help? How can I understand different cultures too? Because I didn't realize it growing up. I just grew up a white boy, and so I still have a lot of learning to do, and I'm learning, and I'm gonna go from there. But yeah, so.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, you're welcome.
Down south, when I went to college, it was a lot more apparent as far as racial slurs, just the way I was treated by different people while I was down there. As far as being here in Minnesota, I was on my way. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was, it was, like I said, it was different being down south as far as being here in Minnesota. There's times I feel like there may be some sort of hatred towards me just for my skin color, but it's not as apparent that people aren't so much as far as racial slurs or anything like that. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Have a good one.
The undertones we see throughout the country, and in fact throughout the world, you see impacts of racism. So you can't untwine it. We can't separate it. We can't see that. But the fact that we live in a state called Minnesota, there was a bunch of Native Americans that lived here before, and white people came and forced them off their land, and so here I am living in this state and living comfortably, and it's because of, in the past, racism, right? So it's we all live in a world that's impacted by racism, and it can't not be that way.